Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we are going to be doing a large review of 10 different movies that I watched in the past couple of months. A lot I actually watched in the past couple of days. And I'm going to be reviewing 10 movies that I missed reviewing earlier this year, just before the end of the year, because I tried to hit 100 movies, new releases in 2021, and I hit 80. So close to 100 movies. And this is actually the most movies I've ever watched in an entire year. And so to celebrate that, before I hit my top 10 movies of the year list, a lot of these were potentially going to be up there. And so I watched a bunch of movies and I'm going to talk about a bunch of them here. You're going to see a bunch of time codes of all the movies if you want to skip to specific ones and you want to hear my thoughts on them, but they're going to be little mini reviews for all of these films. So let's just jump right into it. First movie I want to talk about is Pig, starring Nicolas Cage and Alex Wolff. And this is a movie stars Nicolas Cage. Somebody stole his pig and he just really wants his pig back. And that's the most basic story you could possibly have. And sometimes simplicity is good. This movie's super simple. It's about a man who lost his pig and he wants his pig back. And so he goes on a journey trying to get his pig back, and you learn about his history and his past and why he was living out in the woods with his pig and what this pig means to him throughout the movie. And it's just a really, really well done character story. And I love all the characters in this movie, all the characters that are really interacting with Nicolas Cage's, starring character. I really liked Alex Wolff in this movie. I thought he was phenomenal, of course, because he's a great actor, but he's really great in this movie. Nicolas Cage gives a very subtle and kind of nuanced and calm performance in this movie, besides his boisterous moments that he usually has in some of the movies that he's in recently. He's not crazy insane. He's very subtle in this film. And so although this movie is not going to, spoiler, it's not going to reach my top 10 movies of the year, list, I still really did enjoy this movie. I'm glad that I got a chance to watch it in the past couple days. It's on Hulu if you guys want to check it out. I'd actually recommend it. Next up on this list is another movie that I watched very recently, and that is Titane, which is a French film directed by the director of Raw, and the filmmaker behind this is definitely a unique filmmaker. If you guys have seen Raw, it's one of the most disturbing movies I've ever seen, because, it's about cannibalism, but it's not, overtly, brutal and bloody and all this thing. It's just very, very unsettling with the way that it's directed. And so just in general, hearing that this movie was directed by her, I got very excited for this film, and I didn't know a single thing about this movie before I went into it. And this movie is easily by far the weirdest film I've seen all year. Vincent London and Agatha Roussel, I think I'm saying her name right, are phenomenal in this movie. Their performances really work well together, and you have these two characters that, are so damaged by the, different things that happen in their lives, and they somehow find their way to each other, and they're the perfect fit. It's like, I saw one person describe it as two different puzzle pieces that can only fit with each other. It's the only two pieces that ever match, and it would ever make this perfect match for each other, because they're both damaged in very opposite ways. They're very, very vastly different characters, but for some reason, their sharp edges just match together with each other perfectly. And it's a very interesting character story on that basis alone. The plot details that happen in this movie are completely bonkers insane, but this movie has a lot to say about a lot of different things, and I really appreciated it from this film. Next up is a poster that I have right here, The French Dispatch, which is, Wes Anderson's new movie, and this movie I wanted to love, and quite frankly, I loved a lot of different parts of this film. If you guys don't know what French Dispatch is about, it's about this, newspaper called The French Dispatch, and they have a bunch of different, people working for the paper. Bill Murray's kind of the head of it, and the movie kind of plays with 4 different stories that are in this, little magazine, this little newspaper. 4 different stories, 4 different anthologies that have nothing to do with each other, but are all fascinating stories within themselves. And I think, Owen Wilson's little bit at the beginning was solid, and the whole thing with Benicio del Toro is incredible. I love, that's honestly, if that was just a contained short film within itself, I think it would have, easily been awards worthy, easily won best, short film, best live action short film at the Oscars. It would have been incredible. It's such a well done story. Benicio del Toro is incredible. Léa Seydoux is also really good. Tilda Swinton. There's so many people in this entire film that is just phenomenal, especially in that one little, short sequence. And then it's followed up by the Timothée Chalamet section, which I quite honestly got lost track of what they were trying to talk about in that little short very early on, and I could never recover. It's very, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it, because I just it went completely over my head. Maybe that's on me as a viewer, or maybe it's on the filmmaker, or maybe it's just the fact that that story just was not nearly as interesting as, the previous story. It just fell completely flat for me. And the last one with Jeffrey Wright was really, really solid. And so it has a decent beginning with Owen Wilson, has a great second part with, Benicio del Toro, and then it just completely falls flat for about 30 minutes of this film with Timothée Chalamet. Very kind of disappointed in that aspect, because there's a whole section of this movie that I just flat out did not like, but then it had a solid ending with Jeffrey Wright, but it never reached those high points as that second section. So overall, the movie as a whole, I would recommend parts of it, but not the whole, which is kind of upsetting for a Wes Anderson movie because he makes very unique movies. I love The Royal Tenenbaums. That's one of my favorite movies of all time, and so I love that film. And every time Wes Anderson comes out with a movie, I am going to watch it. Fantastic Mr. Fox is great. Isle of Dogs is great. I love a lot of his movies. I haven't seen all of his movies, and this one, I'm glad I saw it. I saw it in theaters. It was a fun experience overall, but just that one section really just didn't do it for me. Okay, next up is a powerhouse of a film cast. This is The Harder They Fall, which is on Netflix, which is a Western with a kind of different take. It has a large black cast in this film, and it's a very, very well acted. Jonathan Majors, Idris Elba, Regina King, Lakeith Stanfield, so many incredible actors in this film that I absolutely loved, and the performances were great, but the style of this film, the direction, and the unique take on a Western, which is very different from anything that I've seen in a while. And so when you take a Western, a classic Western story, the plot of this movie is not necessarily too complicated or too, new in terms of Westerns. A lot of these beats that they hit in this movie are very, recognizable. You've seen this movie before, but it's that style and that swagger that the movie has with the performances and the everything about it, which is so good. The soundtrack is incredible. The direction of this movie is, like I said, very, very well done. And the ending really did solidify this as one of my, biggest surprises of the year. A movie that I wasn't expecting to really, really enjoy, and a movie that I really want to watch again. And I really need to consider, when I'm making my top movies of the year list, putting this up there because I really, really did enjoy this movie, especially Jonathan Majors. He is a phenomenal actor, and I cannot wait to see what he does in the MCU further after Loki. But he really is a talent, and Idris Elba as the villain of this movie, that's all you have to say. He is so good in this film. This is a big surprise. I highly recommend you guys check this one out on Netflix, and I really want to watch it again. I'll probably watch it again in the next couple of weeks because it just really stuck with me, overall with this year. Next up is an Apple TV Plus movie called Finch. It stars Tom Hanks and really just Tom Hanks. It's a Tom Hanks show. He's, this lone guy. He's in the post-apocalyptic world. Global warming has destroyed the earth. Everybody is either, terrible people that are, scavenging and killing each other, or you're just kind of hiding on your own like Finch is in this movie. And he's trying to create this robot to take care of his dog after he dies. Yes, it's a very sad premise. That's the whole movie. The whole movie is about him building this robot, trying to teach this robot to take care of his dog before his inevitable death in this movie. And so that's the premise of it. Just run with it. And I think this movie's fairly enjoyable. It's very funny. I love the chemistry that he has with this robot. And Tom Hanks, of course, can do no wrong. He's very, very good in this movie. I think my biggest flaw of this film is each, conflict that he runs into this movie is kind of repetitive, He starts off, he goes out into the wild, heat-soaked earth, and then he's, struggling to do something. Something happens, he has to run back to his RV, and then he's safe again, and then he has to do it all over again. He goes out of the RV, something happens, he's in danger, whatever, or the robot messes something up, whatever the situation is. It all feels kind of repetitive. I think the second act really does suffer from repetitive, beats of conflict, but the first act and the third act are incredible, especially the ending. I really love the ending of this movie. And like I said, the chemistry between Tom Hanks and this robot is incredibly well done. And this dog is adorable. Of course, you want him to succeed with building this robot to take care of this dog. And even that, relationship that he has with the dog is also adorable. There's also some cool plot twists in this movie that kind of flesh out the backstory of Finch's character, which was very unexpected. You think it'd go one way. You think there's a cliched reason why he has this dog or why he wants to build this robot or what happened with his life, his family, whatever it is, and it's just not what you would expect. I really appreciated the uniqueness of the character and the very character-driven story, and of course Tom Hanks' incredible performance. Next up is Tick, Tick, Boom, which stars Andrew Garfield and a bunch of other people, and mainly this is the Andrew Garfield show. He is the frontrunner for me to win Best Actor at the Oscars this year. I'm really crossing my fingers that he wins this one because he is phenomenal in this film. If you guys don't know what this movie's about, it's about Jonathan Larson, who wrote the play Rent. But before he wrote Rent, he, kind of struggled as an artist, and he's, 29 years old, turning 30. He feels like he hasn't succeeded in life in his musical career, trying to write this musical that he's been working on for 8 years, and it's a very relatable story as a writer myself, and just as an aspiring artist. This movie really does hit hard. The emotions in it, and the stress and anxiety. This movie's called Tick, Tick, Boom for a reason, because he feels feels like he's under pressure of this ticking clock. And there's one song, Swimming, in this movie that I could not relate more to. This one's also on Netflix. I highly recommend you guys check this out. You'd be obsessed with the music. The opening song, 3090, Swimming, and then of course Therapy are my favorite songs in this movie. And I even went down a rabbit hole on YouTube watching a bunch of different, versions of Therapy on different stage plays with different choreography. That's how much I loved this movie. I just went down the rabbit hole and I listened to all the different music and I listened to all the different plays and I looked up Jonathan Larson. I've done research on him. It's a very fascinating story. I loved this film. Definitely one of my favorites of the year. Next up is going to be King Richard, which stars Will Smith, which is another frontrunner for me to win Best Actor. Will Smith has been in so many movies. He's great. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, when he started off, he was a rapper at first, then he went to do acting with that, and of course he became the world's biggest movie star at a point, starring in so many different things. And over the past decade, he's really been pushing to win an Oscar, and I think this is his biggest valiant effort yet. If anybody has ever doubted Will Smith as being a great actor, watch this movie because he truly is phenomenal. And I know a lot of trepidation with people with this movie because, it's King Richard. It's about Venus and Serena Williams, the famous tennis stars that became, the greatest tennis players of all time. And then it's called King Richard and it's about their dad. But I really would push back against that because, for one, they are producers of the movie, but also it really is not just about, Serena and Venus. It's about the family that grew them to what they were and that relationship that they had with their father. And the first act is very much about King Richard, but the second half is definitely about Venus Williams. And I really have to praise that the child actors in this film who played Venus and Serena, they were also phenomenal in this film. We always get biopics every single year, but for some reason this biopic I really thought was different and unique. It really did hit hard with the emotion. It really did have a great journey. And I personally didn't know the true story. And so to learn this true story and to watch them, fight as children to become, these famous tennis players and the struggles that they dealt with and the situations around it. John Bernthal, also as being one of the coaches, is phenomenal in this film. It's just, this movie is filled with incredible Oscar-worthy performances, great direction, and a very heartwarming and feel-good story that by the end of it, you'll just be in the best mood ever. I loved this film, and I really hope you guys have a chance to check this one out. I think it might still be on HBO Max, but if not, I'm sure it'll be there in a couple weeks. But this one is definitely going to be a front-runner for the Oscars. Next up is Encanto, which was the Thanksgiving Disney release of this year. And this movie I just watched earlier today, and I fell in love with this movie. I really, really did enjoy it. And I'll kind of, top onto Chris Stuckman's thoughts on this film with his video of him saying that we are in a world that is filled with superheroes. There's so many different superhero movies that there's a hard time for kids to kind of relate to some of these heroes because they're so out of this world. And so to have a movie about a girl that is surrounded by superheroes in her family, she's the only one that doesn't have a gift, in this family of magic, and they have all these different abilities. And, she has one sister that's super strong. She has one that can hear everything. She has one that can just is perfect and create flowers out of everything and just so many different unique abilities, but she just has nothing. And so it's about this character trying to navigate, trying to feel accepted by her family. And it's a very heartwarming story. And the music, I will have to praise the music in this movie just as much as I praise the music in Tick, Tick, Boom or in other musicals this year. Like, obviously West Side Story is a classic musical. There's great music in that, but the music in Encanto is very, very good. And I think this movie, although there are a lot of great animated movies this year, I think this one is definitely going to be nominated, obviously. But between this, Raya and the Last Dragon, and Mitchell's vs. the Machines, it's a very, very tough year for Best Animated Feature. Okay, 2 more movies left. Let's talk about The Matrix Resurrections. And I have an interesting, relationship with the Matrix series because the first time I watched The Matrix a few years ago, I was honestly disappointed in the movie because it was, built up with so much hype. And then I watched it and I was like, okay, it's what I was expected. What's the big deal with this movie? But then I watched it again like a year later, and I liked it even more. And I watched it earlier this year in preparation for this movie, and I love The Matrix now. It's one of the best movies ever made. It's flawless in its execution and its, exciting action and its structure and its story, and everything is so unique about it. So much so that everybody tried to copy The Matrix after that movie, and nobody has been able to reach the magic, even the Wachowskis with their other movies in the Matrix franchise. And it was the first year that I actually watched the sequel and the third movie and finished watching the entire trilogy of The Matrix. And honestly, the sequels were not as bad as I was expecting. I really enjoyed the action in Reloaded, despite, some bad CGI. I don't really care too much about that, so I really did enjoy the action in that film, and the story was okay. It wasn't as, perfectly paced and structured as the original one, but it was still a fun movie. And The Matrix Reload, or not Reloaded, they're all very similar in name. The Matrix Revolutions was kind of a disappointment to me because, again, there were some great action sequences in it, but the story felt so convoluted, and there's some things that I feel like I just completely missed in them explaining it, and there's some gaps in my knowledge, and I feel like I just didn't care too much about the ending of the film. I thought it kind of ended in a weird way where it was like, I feel like so much more would go wrong with the ending of this film. It just ended too happy. And so to have a sequel that's, several years later is interesting to see, Neo come back in Trinity and all these actors come back and some actors not coming back and being replaced by other actors. And this movie is just an enigma to me because there are some aspects of this film that I absolutely loved. And I get that people hate this movie, but honestly, I really dug it. The things that I loved, I really loved. The first act of this movie, I thought was weird. I honestly was having a hard time getting into the movie. I thought, okay, if this is how the movie is, sure, let's just jump into it. But once it gets to the second act and the third act of this movie, it completely abandons that tone. And so now looking back at the film overall, even though I was enjoying that first act, I just don't know if I care about that. And I love how meta it was. And there's so many jokes that was really funny to me, but it just felt so totally different from the last half of the movie. Whereas the last half, there are some ideas in it, some ideologies in it that I really, really loved. Of course, it's a Matrix movie, so it has some great action. I don't think the action in this movie is anywhere near as good as the action in any of the other three movies, but it's enjoyable enough. I love the new character of Bugs. I really like what they did with Morpheus in this movie. I honestly wasn't really expecting what they were going to do with it, and I thought that was unique and interesting. I know some people hate it, but I loved it. I didn't like what they did with Smith in this movie. I honestly don't know why he was Smith. There's this new agent. He's a different actor. Of course, he's not going to be Hugo Weaving from the originals, so there's certain, comparing those two actors with each other in their performance as Smith, but that isn't what I disliked about his character. I just didn't know why he was in this movie. I didn't know his motivations, and maybe it's just I need another watch, because this movie was very dense. It had a lot of exposition, had a lot of story beats. It was very different from the other Matrix movies, and just had a lot to take in. And so although there are parts that I love in this movie, it is deeply flawed, but, however, there's a big but in this movie. I really dug the ending. I liked the ending in this movie a lot more than I did in Revolution. So I'm glad that this movie exists in order for me to have a good Matrix ending, because I didn't like how the trilogy ended, and I kind of, had some things that I wanted that I was kind of grasping at. It's like, okay, there's some things that just don't feel that they were closed, or that don't feel like they're resolved in that trilogy, and now I feel like I have resolution. So in that way, I'm glad this movie exists. It's an interesting watch. I want to watch it again to try to get all the information that was in this movie, because, again, very dense movie. And I'm curious to hear what you guys think, especially of this one, because I know it's divisive, and I get why it's divisive. I just need to sit on this movie for more time, honestly. And the last one I want to talk about is also a super divisive movie, fittingly so, and that is Don't Look Up, which is also on Netflix. And this is a movie that stars everybody. Like, everybody's in this movie. Jonah Hill's in this movie. Of course, you got Jennifer Lawrence, and you got Leonardo DiCaprio and Meryl Streep and Cate Blanchett, and just so many people are in this movie. It's kind of insane how many cast members of famous actors and actresses are in this film. It's kind of bonkers. And this is a movie that's, I get why it's divisive, but quite frankly, I really dug this movie. I loved this movie's humor. I loved its story, and I thought it was very just fitting for the year. There's always a movie every year that I feel like that is the movie that is kind of representative of the year as a whole. Joker was a movie for that year. You had The Five Bloods for last year. There's so many movies that just kind of represent the year that they come out in. And I think Don't Look Up is the movie for 2021 because of the divisiveness and the political aspects of it, and just the way that this movie is a meta commentary on all these real world things. But if you take all of that out of this film, I still think that it has a story that is interesting. Yes, it is very blatant in its comedy. If you don't like how blatant it is with, its metaphors of things, it's not even metaphors at this point. It's just, kind of making fun of the world as is. If you're not into that sort of humor, you're gonna hate this movie. You're gonna think it's way too on the nose, no matter what your political affiliation is with this movie. But I didn't mind that because I love the performances and I love the jokes, and I was laughing the entire time in the story. I love end of the world stories. It reminded me of This Is the End. It's a very funny movie about the end of the world, and let's just laugh about it because we're all living it. So it was just a very fun movie for me to watch and to just see all these great actors do great things. I loved Meryl Streep and Jonah Hill in this way, especially Jonah Hill. He was by far my favorite part of the movie. There's also a running joke of this general that, stole money from the main characters that I absolutely loved. Every single time they brought that up, I was just dying laughing. And the ending of this movie, I really loved too. This movie just ended off on a note that was just kind of heartbreaking and sad and depressing. But at the same time, I just felt good about it because the characters in this movie had a resolution in them. I loved Leonardo DiCaprio's arc in this film and Jennifer Lawrence's arc in this film. And then the ending with those two characters I thought were perfect. And the ending with the other characters, if you guys have seen this movie, you know what I mean. It was so funny and so deserved. I just really love the ending of this film. So that is my review for all 10 of these movies that I never reviewed throughout this year. If you guys have thoughts on all these movies, definitely comment down below. I'm curious to hear what you guys think of all these different films, and I'm very excited to get you guys my top 15 movies of the year list. Probably on New Year's Eve. I'm going to upload that video then. So I'm very excited to kind of put that list together and try to figure out what I'm putting where. I'm probably going to rethink some things because of talking about some movies in this video. So I'm just excited to get the end of the year wraps for you guys. So that was 2021. I believe I reviewed up to like at least 70 of the movies that I watched of all 80 movies that I watched this year. I had a fun time reviewing movies and just talking to you guys on this channel all year. I'm curious to hear all your guys' thoughts and the continuation of everybody's most anticipated movies of next year. So let's just call it a year for 2021, and I'm excited to get into 2022. So thanks guys for watching this video. Thanks guys for subscribing, to supporting the channel. I really appreciate that, and I hope to see you all in my next one.